Alrighty, welcome back to Shop and Ball. I am Aaron Chow, accompanied by my co-host John Harris, as always, and we're back to share our Week 14 picks/bets. Once again, air quotes around bets against the spread. So to update y'all, in case you haven't been following or missed out a couple times, John's still in the lead overall. I actually didn't paste that, but nonetheless, you're plus 20 on Week 13. I went minus 100. So overall, John is only minus 360. Well, I am still deeply in the negatives at negative 3,180. So still have a lot of ground, and time is not my friend or not on my side at this point. And then, in case you missed last episode too, John also won our fantasy little matchup. Not just the matchup, but also the survivor pool and et cetera, et cetera. So it's all you this season, man, right now.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see if I can keep it up. Unfortunately for me, although it's working out in some of those regards, at the same time in our fantasy league, I need a lot to go my way if I want the bye week. Most likely you're going to get it. And, well, I don't know if I'll say most likely, because I guess you and Mitch both have tough matchups this week. Or not tough, but you're not getting some cupcake, right? Where you're playing Johnny, so that sucks. Johnny. But also for my Cowboys, even if they win against the Eagles this week, they still need the Eagles to lose again, which kind of sucks. So yeah,
kind of funny how fantasy can sometimes betray almost a real life. You need some help. Destiny's not in your hands, technically. So, but like I mentioned, in regards to at least the picks and the spreads, you're doing great. I will say, at least in regards to overall, okay, not money wise, just record against the spread. Last week you went 4-9. I went 7-6. So there's a little bit of a silver lining for me there, as I'm only 8 games behind now in regards to overall. So maybe there I can catch some pride and at least make it competitive if I'm not going to make the gambling part competitive. But nonetheless, let's dive into the picks for Week 14. Obviously going to start with Thursday night, and as always too, we're not sponsored by this. I just grab these spreads from thelines.com. They have all different betting sites, but nonetheless, we were just talking about this before we started recording, because this is a tough Thursday night game unless you're a fan of these two teams and treasure their storied past and success, but as of recently, these two teams have not been as good as they usually were. That's the Pittsburgh Steelers. They are at home. They are favored by 5.5 points, hosting the New England Patriots. So yeah, don't think we'll be seeing a lot of fireworks at this game offensively. We shouldn't, at least, but nonetheless, John, who do you have here and for how much?
I'm going with the Steelers. I'm only putting 10 on it. This is a gross game. The Steelers' offense is miserable. The Patriots' offense is miserable. It's going to be a low-scoring affair. I'm pretty sure I saw the over-under total for the game is at 30, which is crazy low. For an NFL game to be at 30, I mean, they're expecting this to be a pretty bad game. So, yeah, I'm putting 10 on the Steelers. And the only reason that I feel way more confident in Pittsburgh is I feel like there's a chance that, TJ Watt could get a strip sack fumble and put him in easy field position, stuff like that, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going Pittsburgh for 10 also. Same reasoning. I mean, New England, we mentioned it. Doesn't matter who the quarterback is. They can't move the ball, and then also now they just turn the ball over at inopportune times. And although it may be Mitch Trubisky at quarterback for the Steelers, they just have more weapons, and like you mentioned, it's very likely the defense might be the only one that scores a touchdown, the Pittsburgh defense, and then the offense generates a field goal or two, and it's a 13-6 game, maybe, I don't know, but nonetheless, yeah, we're both playing it safe, kind of avoiding this kind of gross Thursday night matchup, as we're both putting 10 on the Pittsburgh Steelers to cover that 5.5 points over the New England Patriots. I think that's about good for that game, but so let's move on over to the Sunday games now, starting with a very interesting one, which is the Cleveland Browns. They are at home, favored by 3.5 points, hosting the Jacksonville Jaguars. As I always mentioned, I'll mention again, we're recording this on a Wednesday, so as of right now, don't really know who, or at least the status of who will be the starting quarterback for the Jaguars. Maybe Trevor Lawrence, but he's dealing with that ankle injury, and he hasn't practiced as of today. So it could be CJ Beathard in his place. So who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I'm going to go with the Jags. I do think it's probably going to be Beathard, so I'm kind of taking that into account. Like, I understand the risk that I'm taking here, but at the same time, I mean, he's been somewhat serviceable throughout his career when he was with San Francisco. I feel like the Jags have the playmakers. They can kind of insulate him. I mean, no Christian Kirk sucks, but we've seen that ETN has been able to have some explosive plays. We've seen that Evan Ingram has been really solid this year, and Calvin Ridley has had his moments, and I think they're going to rely on him a lot more. Although Cleveland's defense does scare me a lot, at the same time, their offense, I also have worries about. They have similar issues in terms of efficiency running the ball. Joe Flacco is, a veteran, but still relatively new to the team. The Jags defense, I mean, you got Josh Allen, who's, I think, third or second in the league in total sacks, so he could be a problem. You got Tyson Campbell, who's one of the highest graded corners in the league this year, so he could be an issue for them, especially considering I don't know the status of Amari Cooper. So there's just a lot of iffies on both sides of the ball for me, which is why I'm just kind of leaning on this maybe being a close game. The 3.5 is what gives me comfort here. So I'm taking Jacksonville. Will they win? I don't know, but I'm only going to put 50 because although I do think it's low scoring, I don't know how confident I really am in either team. So I'm not going to go the standard 100, just the 50.
All right, well, as you kind of alluded to, I'm going with the standard 100, but I'm going the opposite way. So our first disagreement, I'm going with the Cleveland Browns for 100. Like you kind of alluded to, I don't know what we're going to get out of the quarterback position in Jacksonville, even if it is Trevor Lawrence on a bad ankle. We know how good this Cleveland defense is, and I still have concerns about Jacksonville's offense at times. I know last week was high scoring, but it was kind of a crazy Monday night game. And as we mentioned before, Cleveland's like literally one of the top defenses in the league. And especially with that, you mentioned potentially no Calvin Ridley, definitely no Christian Kirk, so that already hurts your weapons. And we've mentioned too in recent weeks that the run game for them hasn't had that same efficiency as it has or did earlier in the season. Now maybe they go back to it, obviously, because their quarterback situation and lack of weapons, but nonetheless, I just feel like Cleveland, even with Joe Flacco and even maybe with no Amari Cooper, This feels like their type of game that they've been playing all this year, and I think they'll find a way to win. So I'm going with Cleveland for 100. I'm believing in the elf, and but we'll see if they burn me and prove me wrong, and if John is the genius here. Once again, John's been winning most of the season, so maybe go with him in regards to disagreements here. But so John, as I mentioned, going with Jacksonville for 50 to at least keep it within 3.5 or just straight up win. Well, I got the Browns for 100. They have to win by at least 4 or more to cover for me. So now we go on to my division, NFC North, where the Detroit Lions are the favorites. They are favored by 3.5 points going to the Windy City of Chicago, obviously to play the Bears. Who do you have here, John, and for how much?
Well, this game obviously is interesting because the last time they played, it was in Detroit, and Detroit was heavily favored, and they lost. Or no, they won, but they almost lost. Like, it came down to a miracle drive. So I'm going to go with Detroit. I just think that Chicago, I think they kind of overperformed last time, is kind of my gut. I do think this is a high-scoring game, but in that, I just favor the Lions here. Last time it was a high-scoring affair as well. So I don't know. I could be wrong and just completely misreading the Detroit Lions, but I think that they've just kind of been in a little bit of a rut recently where they don't quite look as good as they did to start the season. And I feel like if there's any game to have sort of a get-right game, it would be against a team like Chicago, who just really isn't that great. So although they had troubles with them earlier in the year, I feel like this is maybe a little bit of a bounce back opportunity for the Lions, and they'll get it going. Plus, I'm pretty sure last time when they played, didn't the Lions have like 3 turnovers or something? Like, didn't Goff throw 3 picks?
Yeah, he had 3 interceptions. I actually have that game pulled up. 3 interceptions. They also had a fumble too. Craig Reynolds fumbled as well.
Yeah, so I'm also kind of banking on the fact that I assume because of what happened last time, Detroit's not going to be as careless with the ball and might put a little bit of a more emphasis on that regard. And if that does happen, like I said, I don't know. Ultimately, I think that the Lions are going to come out on top and cover. So taking the Lions for 100.
All right, well, no disagreement between us. I'm going with the Bears for 40, just because I think the main factor for me is at Chicago. We mentioned this last year. I'm going to bring it up again. We're going to start bringing this up with some other quarterbacks too. But some quarterbacks do struggle and poor inclement weather, and we know Chicago's literally called the Windy City. It's December. I have concerns about Jared Goff in the passing game. I think that Detroit will win. I think ultimately they are the more talented team overall. I think they'll figure it out. Obviously, they're a more desperate team. They have a lot to play for standings wise. But I think the Bears will keep it close. I think it's important to remember last time they did play that the Bears did jump ahead, and that was with Justin Fields' first game back. So now he's had a couple of weeks to get back in the flow of things. And I think especially because they lost the last one, I think that bodes more confidence for the Bears. And I just think they keep this one close. So I'm threading the needle here. Hey, if they do win and pull off the upset, that would be amazing too. Just for my bet and for NFC North and just NFC standings as well. That would shake things up a little bit. So I'm going with the Bears. I'm only going 40 though because I'm not entirely confident. Obviously, their offenses or their whole team really doesn't have my full trust. So I'm only going 40 on the Bears to keep it close against the Lions. While John has 100 on the Detroit Lions to cover that 3.5 points over the Bears in Chicago. So we'll see if there is inclement weather and, obviously how Jared Goff and obviously both teams handle that since you mentioned there was a lot of turnovers last time they played. So now let's go on over to another divisional matchup in the NFC. This one in the lovely NFC South. And this one does have big implications, though, for the division race, as it is the Atlanta Falcons, the current leader of the NFC South. They are at home, favored by 1.5 points, hosting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Who do you have for this one, John, and for how much?
I am going to go with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I don't really like either side of this team or of this game. Atlanta's offense is just they've reached new lows, and I mean, honestly, I'm just kind of banking on the fact that like Rashad White has been hot, Mike Evans has been hot. I feel like I can kind of ride that momentum, and ultimately, at the same time, this is completely flawed logic, but I just can't see the Falcons pulling away from this division, right? And the Buccaneers are like a game behind. The Falcons currently have the lead. It feels like the most NFC South thing possible for the Falcons to lose this week. The Panthers and Buccaneers both win. Not the Panthers. The Saints and Buccaneers both win, making it a 3-way tie. Like, that just feels like the most NFC South thing to happen. So I'm taking Tampa.
All right. Well, I'm going the opposite way. A lot of disagreements thus far. Third one. I'm going with Atlanta. They do seem to be a better team at home, and their defense has been very good, especially in the red zone. And we've seen that Tampa Bay still kind of reliant on the big Mike Evans plays, and their offense is hit or miss at times. And I think with Atlanta too, we know that they love to go on their slow, methodical drives that eat up a lot of time, even though it typically ends up in 3 points. That's just where they kind of get you. And I just think that the Falcons will ultimately pull through here at home, especially with those implications, and maybe try to put more emphasis on gaining that traction or extra cushion for the division lead. Because if I remember correctly too, I remember last season they were in the race too towards the end of the year, and they kind of lost steam. Obviously, they changed quarterbacks, that didn't help. So I would assume Arthur Smith and the guys in there, they're going to have a better mentality to try to finish out the rest of the season, especially this big one to start December. So I'm going the opposite way with John. We have a disagreement here. I'm going 50 on the Falcons to cover that 1.5 point spread, while John's going with the Buccaneers to at least keep it within 1 if they lose, or straight up win, which, 1.5, that could easily happen.
I'm taking them to win, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, this is more of a pick 'em, but I guess, Atlanta's at home. Because technically, neutral field, I guess, usually they say 3 points goes to the home team. Technically, I guess neutral field, Vegas believes more in the Bucs. So, there's further reinforcement for your ideology and your logic there in that pick. So we'll see who is right and obviously who gains control or either gains control or muddles things up for the NFC South in that game. Unless they tie, that would be that would be more NFC South if they tied. I'll say that would be good for you, but just game wise, that'd be funny. But anyways, let's go on over to New York, where it is the Houston Texans. They are the favorites by 3.5 points. Obviously going to New York to play the Jets. Looking like it will be the return of Zach Wilson at quarterback for the Jets. So who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I am going to go with Houston. I don't know. Maybe this is just because, honestly, I don't feel like I have the greatest grasp on Houston or the Jets as of late. Like, I mean, just even literally last week, I picked against Houston and I picked the Jets and I got both wrong. So this could just be complete recency bias, but my gut told me to go with the Jets, and my gut has been wrong recently on these two teams. So I'm going straight opposite. I'm not doing this for every game. This is just the only one where, like I said, my gut has been wrong on these two teams, so I'm taking the Texans. I also do believe in C.J. Stroud. The Jets' defense has not been as impressive as I would have liked to, as we're kind of reaching the end of the season. Notably, like the Dolphins had their way with them. Now, no Tank Dell does worry me a little bit, but I still think that the Texans come out on top. And also, the real key to my pick is I really think that the Texans defense can shut down the Jets offense entirely. And so I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that this could be like a 17-10 game with the Texans winning. So,
all right. Well, I am threading the needle and also technically disagree because I'm going with the Jets. I'm only putting 10, so that shows you my level of confidence in this needle thread. I just feel like the defense, especially you mentioned no Tank Dell, I think they'll really limit that Houston offense. We have seen them struggle at times, even against like Carolina, for example. I would suspect that they're going to be able to stop the run the Jets defense, and I kind of got to see it again from Nico Collins and whoever else too. That's also a concern. Like, is Noah Brown going to be available, and what will he be able to produce now that he's kind of being elevated to wide receiver too, most likely. So yeah, I just have some concerns there. I think Houston still pulls away here and wins this one, but hey, it wouldn't shock me if Zach Wilson, the Jets keep it close, kind of like he was doing, but yeah, he wasn't winning games because Jets offense is kind of mid at best. More like honestly more instinct filled than mid, but yeah. So I'm just believing in the Jets defense to cover at home. We'll see if CJ Stroud will prove me wrong and prove you right. So once again, John going with the Texans for 100 to cover that 3.5 points. While I'm going with the Jets to cover or possibly pull off the upset. So we'll see who prevails there. And that AFC matchup. Now we're going back to the NFC South. You mentioned these two teams earlier, and they are against each other. It's the other two NFC South teams. It's New Orleans Saints at New Orleans. They are favored by 5.5 points, hosting the Carolina Panthers. Who do you have here, John, and for how much?
Well, speaking of threading the needle, I'm going to attempt it with this one. Like I said, very NFC South thing would be the Buccaneers and Saints winning, and I think the Saints win, but I'm going to take the Panthers to cover here. They played earlier in the season, and this was unfortunately the game in which, in fantasy, I went 0-2 because Adam Thielen scored a garbage time touchdown. And I went 0-2 because not only did that touchdown make my opponent surpass me, but I was the 5th highest scorer. He was the 6th highest scorer. When he surpassed me, I lost to the median as well. So, yeah, that sucked. And I don't know. I mean, I don't think they covered in that game either. Like, I'm pretty sure the Saints covered that one, but regardless, I'm taking the Panthers here. I don't know. This is just kind of a gut call that this game is going to get kind of ugly. Jonathan Mingo and Chuba Hubbard have kind of started to step up for the Panthers. Meanwhile, on the Saints side, they've been dealing with injuries left and right. Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, Derek Carr, like a lot of key guys are getting hurt. And so all of a sudden they're having to rely a lot more on Juwan Johnson and Taysom Hill. And it's not bad. Like, those are great players. But at the same time, I just don't know if the full offense really has the chemistry needed to go out there and do enough to pull away here. So, like I said, threading the needle because I do think the Saints win, but the Panthers cover, and for that, I'm only putting 10. Because when you're taking the Panthers to cover a game, It's a bold take, I will admit.
Yeah, so it's like taking the Jets to get to keep it within the spread. So yeah, I mean, listen, I'm putting 30 on the New Orleans Saints just to be outright. Obviously, my bet also indicates not much confidence in regards to this game and the spread. I think I'm with you. I think obviously New Orleans prevails, and obviously I pick them to cover. Maybe the factor of having Alvin Kamara as a safety blanket, constant check down car, especially if he's hurt, helps. And I still just don't have much confidence in Carolina's offense. Well, at least New Orleans, especially at the beginning of the year, they hadn't really been incorporating Taysom Hill that much, but I think we've been seeing that more and more. It's just added a little bit of an extra element, although it does suck that they've lost some other pieces. But I think they have found a little bit of rhythm on offense, at least more consistency a little bit. Obviously, the second half of the Detroit game, I think that will help kind of ride some momentum to start this game, and especially since, like you mentioned, division is within grasp for them. So I think they'll be. I would assume they're on their extra P's and Q's and feeling that pressure to stay within striking distance to make the playoffs. So I am going with the Saints to cover that 5.5 points, only putting 30, while John is going with the Panthers to keep it within 5 or possibly pull off the upset, but once again, only for 10. So neither of us very confident in this game, so maybe that should go show that don't bet the spread in this game, at least for what we got here. But now
This week has a couple of those games, to be honest.
This has a lot of them, yeah.
The Thursday game, the 2 backups in Jacksonville, Cleveland. There's some ugly games this week.
And then there's also there's a couple of good games where there are. You don't know which way it's gonna go. So, all right, let's go to one that may not be one of those. Who knows? We'll see. Maybe a good one. And it's gonna be the Baltimore Ravens. They are at home, fresh off their bye. Favored by 7.5 points, hosting the LA Rams, who have recently kind of gone on a little streak here. We'll see if they can continue that, as obviously Baltimore trying to keep the top spot in the AFC, while the Rams trying to stay in playoff contention in the NFC. Who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I am going to go with the Ravens. I'm going to put 200 on them. I think they continue to roll. They've been dominant. I mean, I don't know really what else to say about the Ravens. They're a really good football team. So I'm taking the Ravens. I do think that the main reason I'm picking them is I think that they can potentially take away Kyren Williams, who to me has really been the lifeblood of the Rams offense since his return. If you watch these Rams games, they are relying so heavily on him, which is kind of crazy to think about, by the way, because his athletic profile is nothing special.
5'9",
he's short. He ran a 4.6 40. He didn't do that many reps on the bench press. Everything that you want at the combine, Kyren Williams did not really excel at, and yet the guy's balling out, which just goes to show that the combine is not everything. But he's been so important for this offense. Obviously, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, they're also very important, but I feel like Kyren Williams is really the catalyst of a lot of what they've been doing recently, and I feel like Baltimore's going to know that. This is a really good defense. You got Roquan Smith at linebacker. I feel like there's going to be an emphasis to take away Kyren Williams and force them to pass a lot, and we obviously know that the Ravens have a good secondary, and they're getting after the passer this year, so I'm going to go with the Ravens here. I don't think that the Rams defense is going to be prepared to slow down Lamar Jackson at all. So I feel confident in Baltimore. I'm putting 200 on them. And it also helps my case that the AFC playoff picture, they're vying for that 1 seed, and I think they're going to be hungry for it.
Yeah, this is one where I am threading the needle. I am in agreement that I think Baltimore will win this one, but I think the LA Rams will keep it close. Wouldn't even shock me if they pull off the upset. You mentioned Kyren Williams. I think he's helped definitely bring more balance to their offense. Obviously, just a running, but also another weapon. Sean McVay also very creative in the screen game, just getting his running back the ball and other playmakers involved. And I feel like the offense will hold up there in the bargain. And then on the flip side, I think the Rams defense will do enough to slow down Baltimore's offense. I am concerned because Baltimore coming off the bye. Who knows if they've, with the extra week of preparation, just if they've cooked up some extra things and such. But I think the Rams just keep it close. It's Matthew Stafford, so even if the run game gets shut down, I think he'll be able to at least keep the game within striking distance. But ultimately, when I'm thinking that Baltimore prevails. But hey, if he pulls through, great for me still. As once again, John putting 200 on the Baltimore Ravens to cover the 7.5 points. I'm going with the LA Rams to keep it within 7 or pull off the upset for 50. And another disagreement for us. We're on a disagreement streak here. So let us continue and see how much more we will disagree. This is very interesting just at this point of the year. But
I will say, too, I mean, you hyped me up earlier saying I have the better record. At least last week on our disagreements, I'm pretty sure you went 4-1 against me. So you definitely have the hot hand in terms of our disagreements. The only one I got on you last week was the Cardinals. But all the other ones, you were right.
Yeah, but overall, I mean, that's the 1 week. That's probably the 1 week where I won the disagreements, where the other weeks, it's, it was either I don't
know the overall record on our disagreements. That would be interesting to track what our records are.
I would assume
this.
It has to be better since you have the better record, but we'll see.
Could be. Yeah, I mean, well, actually, yeah, that makes sense because the games where we don't disagree, obviously, we get the same. So,
and also, like, we're both sucking. We're both like under 500, so it's not like we're both like really good at picking, and then because the money shows that too. But anyway,
so maybe I should disagree with you more, is what you're saying here.
Yeah, like I think that's what I said. Remember, at some point, I was like, maybe just go the opposite of me. Because it was pretty bad midway through the season. So, anyhow, speaking of bad midway through the season, both these next two teams lost their starting quarterbacks for the year, but they're both within title contention. And it is obviously the Indianapolis Colts, Gardner Minshew, and they are favored by 1.5 going to Cincinnati to play Jake Browning, and the Bengals fresh off their big win on Monday night. Obviously, I mentioned both these teams in playoff contention, of course. So who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I am going to go with the Bengals, and I don't know if this is Jake Browning recency bias or what, but I don't know. The Bengals look good against the Jags. Like, they looked really good, and I feel like I don't see any reason why Joe Mixon, Jamar Chase can't have some more big weeks against the Colts defense. Like, the Colts defense is okay, but they're not spectacular by any means. And, the lack of Jonathan Taylor causing them to maybe run or pass the ball a little bit more. And although I like the passing game, I like Minshew, I like the receivers they have, I don't necessarily feel like they have that wow factor that makes me think that the Colts are going to pull away here. So at home, Bengals maybe get some new life in them after, that last win. I think they might be a little bit more confident all of a sudden than they were about a week ago when Joe Burrow, the injury was more fresh. So I'm going to take the Bengals. I'm only going to put 50, but I'm going to take the Bengals.
Yeah, it's an interesting matchup. So as I was leading to, I'm going the opposite way again. Another disagreement. I'm going with the Colts here to cover the spread. I'm only putting 50 as well. I've been liking what I've seen out of their offense, like you mentioned recently. And I think they usually do enough. And as long as Mitchell, he's only had that one real bad game where it was against, I think, Jacksonville, where he threw a bunch of picks and, didn't really take care of the ball, obviously. He's been doing that very well recently. Hopefully they get the run game going again. Obviously they'll need that against the Bengals, but it's hard to run against the Bengals as well. And on the flip side, while Indy's defense has been mostly miss this season, I just feel like they will be able to look at last week and be like, okay, let's try to take away some of the short pass options that they were doing so well last week in manufacturing touches to, obviously you mentioned Chase and Joe Mixon. But I just feel like Indy maybe feeling they've already been kind of riding this wave of confidence, while Cincinnati, it's tough. Like, they're at home too, so that's always tough to consider. This is one of those ones you mentioned that was just really tough. That's why I'm only putting 50 on the Colts. I was kind of more writing that they're the hotter hand right now than the Bengals, but that could easily be proven wrong. And we'll see who comes out on top here. Once again, we both put 50. John going with the Bengals. They're the underdog, and I'm going with the Colts here. So we'll see who prevails there in that 50-point or 100 swing. Let's move on over to the West Coast, to the NFC West, where it is the San Francisco 49ers. They are at home, favored by 10.5 points, hosting the Seattle Seahawks. Who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I'm threading the needle once again. I'm taking Seattle. I'm putting 10 on them because I don't have a ton of confidence here because they got kind of schmacked on Thanksgiving last time. But I'm taking Seattle to cover the 10.5. Obviously, it's a big number. It's the second biggest spread of the week. And I don't know. It's a rivalry game. And for that reason alone, I'm going with Seattle. But like I said, because of what happened last time, I probably said the exact same logic. Even though I picked the Niners last time, I'm picking Seattle.
All right, well, I'm going with the Niners here. I think they will obviously cover that 10.5. I just think riding that wave of momentum. And although Seattle's had extra time, I just feel like it's really tough. We mentioned this tough stretch, and it's going to be tough for them to go in here. And it's already going to be an uphill battle to do that, but also do that coming off the tough loss in Dallas, where you probably should have had that game, maybe just for a few plays, especially with your defense, if they could have gotten stop. And especially, I think San Francisco is going to have their way on offense against Seattle, like we've seen pretty recently. And then on the flip side, we mentioned like Seattle's offense is just too reliant upon their guys just getting open as opposed to the coaches putting them in winning positions. And who knows if Kenneth Walker will play too, and he's obviously an important X factor in the run game. Charbonnet was solid last week, but I think you see like they're relying upon their explosive athletes to make plays. And we saw with the Niners and Eagles last week, where you got to have the schematical advantage as well when you play the Niners, or hope that they are on their off game, or have a couple of key injuries, which isn't the case right now injury wise. So I'm going with the Niners to cover for 200, that 10.5, while John is putting only 10, the minimum, on Seattle to potentially keep it within 10, and very likely, like we mentioned before. So we'll see who wins that one, and obviously who covers. Now let's move on to the Vikings. They are fresh off their bye week. I've announced it's going to be Josh Dobbs starting at quarterback this game, and they are favored by 2.5 points going to the Las Vegas Raiders. Raiders also coming off their bye. So who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I'm taking the Minnesota Vikings. I'm putting 70. It's a weird number because it's what I had left over. It was the last game that I put points on, and whatever was left was going here. I believe in the Vikings. Honestly, I probably would have put more, but like I said, it was just kind of how the cookie crumbled. So I think they'll get back to their winning ways. It's a good matchup to have a bounce-back game. I think they've lost 2 straight after that 5-game win streak. They're certainly in the wild card race still, and they're going to want to, get the dub here and try and get back in that a little bit more consistently. So, yeah, I'm taking the Vikings for 70.
And I'm sorry, do you know? I saw on the NFL report, so I'm assuming, and I don't have him in any leagues. Do we know Justin Jefferson's availability, if he's still questionable?
I think he's supposed to play this week. Okay, I'm pretty sure they said that he was going to be playing after the bye.
Okay, because I didn't. Okay, I'll double check that in a second. But nonetheless, that doesn't change my pick.
I'll look it up right now.
Because I'm going with the Vikings also. So finally off the disagreement train for a minute. I'm only putting 10 just because we've kind of seen this Raiders team be quite feisty. And we've seen the Vikings, while they've went on that win streak, they also, important to remember, even earlier in the year when it was Kirk Cousins, and during this recent tough patch, turn the ball over really has been an issue for them. And the Raiders have kind of been relying upon teams and turnovers. While their defense may not generate just stops on their own 3 and outs or punts, they do tend to live off those. So that's the only scary thing. But ultimately, yeah, Minnesota, I think, I have more confidence in their skill position players, especially if Justin Jefferson's back. And we've seen that their defense usually has the right idea on how to slow and frustrate offense, especially a young Aiden O'Connell, who we saw get sacked 7 times against the Chargers. I just feel like this will be another game where he may get sacked, 4 or 5 times at inopportune times and opportunities. So I'm going with the Vikings as well. With John putting 70, I am putting 10 on the.
Which, by the way, for Jefferson, he was the first time since week 5. Today, he was a full participant in practice, and he is set to play this weekend.
Awesome. So and I'm sure Viking fans love that too. So we both going with Minnesota here to cover the 2.5 points over the Raiders. Now let's move on to one of the key AFC rivalries that's been brewing in recent years, and it is the Kansas City Chiefs. They are at home, favored by 1.5 points, hosting the Buffalo Bills. Bills coming off their bye week. Chiefs coming off that tough loss at Lambeau last Sunday night. Who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I am taking Buffalo. I don't know. I feel like this is going to be a shootout game. I feel like Josh Allen has hurt a lot of the doubters. He had that bounce back game against the Eagles, in which obviously they didn't win, but he lit it up. And I feel like the same is going to happen, where he's going to go kind of crazy and overcome this defense. But on the other side, I don't know. I don't know how much I trust the Kansas City receivers to really keep up in a potential shootout. I could be wrong in that regard, but either way, I'm getting some points here. So yeah, I'm taking Buffalo for the standard 100.
All right, well, I'm going with the Chiefs here. I'm putting 200 on them as well to win and cover. I just still have I know it was a great performance for Josh Allen, the Bills. You mentioned against the Eagles. I feel like the Chiefs defense is more sound than the Eagles. We mentioned that they've been, letting up points kind of crazy recently. And I just think the Chiefs defense will be able to, they played Josh Allen before, and I think they will be able to contain him. And like we've mentioned, contain him, double digs, who else is going to beat us? And I think that they'll be fine in that regard. And I wouldn't be shocked if their offense leans more into Pacheco and, really just utilize, like we mentioned against Green Bay, like he was extremely efficient. They just kind of got away from him at times. So I'm assuming Andy Reid will be more diligent and patient with the run game, and that they'll, another week with Rashee Rice. He was solid last week. I'm assuming he'll be a little more involved this week. And obviously, Kelsey, he's been putting up some better, more efficient numbers recently too. And we've mentioned how obviously injury riddled the Buffalo defense is, just how disappointing it's been, at least in regards to the expectations they came with to start the season. So I think the Chiefs will handle their business and get the bounce back win here. And it just feels like this will be one that Buffalo, this might be the nail in the coffin, where like this, I know they'll still technically be in playoff race, so this will really put them behind the 8 ball and will ultimately look back and be like, yep, that was the game that they had to win and they didn't win, unfortunately. So we'll see who is correct here on this disagreement. And obviously one of our biggest bets and disagreements of the week, John putting 100 on the Bills to cover that 1.5 point spread or keep it within 1 or win, while I have 200 on the Chiefs to win by 2 or more. So we'll see who prevails in regards to there, because like I mentioned, that's 300 swing. But let's move on over, staying in the AFC West, to AFC West divisional matchup between the LA Chargers. It's at LA. They are favored by 2.5 points, hosting the Denver Broncos. Obviously, both these teams need this one because they're both in that wild card discussion. So who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I'm taking Denver. Honestly, I just don't trust the Chargers. Like, if we're going to be real, that's really the only reason. Denver has shown far more on the year than the Chargers have. I do think this could be a shootout because the Denver defense, the one weakness they do have is giving up a lot of passing yards, which is kind of crazy considering the secondary do have. But like CJ Stroud was able to have success through the air last week. But overall, just as a full team, I think that Herbert can have a good game, but they're just so they're so one-dimensional, very predictable, that like I just don't think it's going to result in a win. So honestly, I'm picking the Broncos to win here for 100.
Yeah, I've had the same ideology. Just like you mentioned, you said right off the bat, you don't trust the LA Chargers. I don't either. Like, especially that defense, and it seems like last week, Denver still had a chance to win that game. Russ threw that pick in the red zone, but we've seen the offense doing a very good job of taking care of the ball. And then I think we've mentioned before, LA defense, I think they can be ran on. And we mentioned, though, regardless in regards to their offense, it's really just, can you slow down Keenan Allen? And obviously Austin Eckler hasn't had the same production as he did last year. He was, finding the end zone a lot. So, yeah, I'm going with Denver as well. And this field, I don't hate Brand. We don't hate Brand Staley. I'm just saying this feels like this. Every week feels like this could be the week that if they lose, this is the final nail in the coffin for him, and he's gone.
I'll be honest. I feel like the nail was weeks ago, and they're probably just waiting till the end of the season. Because, man, it like you said, it feels like every week it should be, and it feels like every week it could be. And they've even winning against the Patriots, like it was a 6-0 win, and that felt somehow disappointing.
Yeah,
and it was a win.
It was, yeah. Despite that, so yeah, so we're both in agreement. We both feel that Denver should. At least keep it close. We're getting points, but we wouldn't be shocked if Denver just outright wins this game over the LA Chargers. So once again, I'm putting 200 on the Broncos. I'm feeling fairly confident, while you are putting 100 on the Broncos here to cover. So we'll see if if Russ in the game can cook for us. And just get the win or cover. But now we move to the Sunday night game. Your game is definitely the game of the weekend, and it is the Dallas Cowboys, favored by 3.5 points, hosting the Philadelphia Eagles. I'll throw it to you, John. Who do you have here, and for how much?
I'm going with my Cowboys. Call me biased, call me a fan, whatever you want to call me. I really feel like it's tough to beat a team twice. The Cowboys are incredible at home this year. They have not lost a game in Dallas this season. I also believe that the Cowboys are like, I think it's been, I could be wrong on this stat because I'm not super confident what I'm about to say, but I'm pretty sure they've won like 8 straight games at home against Philadelphia. So it might not be 8, it might be 6, it might be 4, whatever. They're on a winning streak basically against Philadelphia at home. And I know that like they won last year against the Eagles at home. So ultimately, I just believe in the Cowboys. I honestly felt like on the whole of the game last time, they had more opportunities that they failed to take advantage of. That if they had properly taken advantage of them, they would have come out on top. And like, I mean, you know, people could say that someone's going to respond, well, you could say that about every game. Yeah, but not every game is it like you're literally on the goal line, knee down, Luke Schoonmaker, like could have been a touchdown, and instead it's not, and then you turn the ball over, and then could have been a 2-point conversion, which would have allowed them to kick a field goal at the end to go to overtime, but instead Dak's like a couple inches short. Like they were literally inches away from that game being completely different, and I feel like they're going to come out on top in this one and show that they're still hungry, that they are in the race.
Interesting. So I'm taking Philly, but it's a 3.5 point spread. I'm very surprised. I guess maybe because Dallas is home, they're the harder team. That Philly was the underdog here. I'm basically give me the points. I'm taking Philly because I think I wouldn't be shocked if Dallas wins, but it's one of those that we mentioned sometimes spread wise. But it's like I'm not sure if Dallas is going to win by more than 3. Like it's good. I think it's still going to be a close game. And I wouldn't be shocked though if Philly does pull out the win. You know, if they may probably just lean on their run game. And, you know, we've seen Dallas at times, you know, have issues with teams overpowering them in the run game. Obviously only the San Franciscos and Phillies of the world can probably do that. So obviously concerned about Philly's defense. Like we mentioned, they've definitely been had and it can be had this week. I just feel like Philly's going to keep it close regardless. To come out that loss to San Francisco, they know that they really can't afford another loss, especially to the Cowboys, because that's an extra, you know, obviously divisional, and it just, like you mentioned, it pulls them back in the kind of in the muck. It
puts them in a situation, just for anyone who's wondering, if they lose to the Cowboys, the Niners actually become the 1 seed, assuming that the Niners don't lose to Seattle, because they play earlier in the day. The Niners would become the 1 seed because they would be tied on record, and the Niners obviously beat both Dallas and Philadelphia because all 3 would be tied on record. Philadelphia would still hold the tiebreaker over Dallas because they would. I've gone through the scenarios here, so I'm about to lay it out. They'd be tied head to head. I think they are tied in terms of winning against divisional opponents because neither of them have lost to either the Giants or Washington, which Dallas still has an opportunity. They both still have an opportunity to, but they haven't so far. Basically, when you go through all the tiebreakers, they're tied on like common opponents because they both play the Jets. Eagles lost to the Jets, Cowboys won, but they also both play the Cardinals. Cowboys lost to the Cardinals. They both lost to the Niners. So like they're tied on all that stuff. It comes down to record against the conference, the NFC, and that's where that Cardinals loss kills the Cowboys because the Eagles' only loss, apart from the Niners, who they both lost to, and then obviously losing to each other, was the AFC, the Jets. So it goes down to conference record. The Eagles would still hold the tiebreaker in that regard, meaning Dallas would need Philly to lose again in order to win the division.
Yeah, so obviously a lot on the line for both teams. We'll see who prevails. Once again, John putting 200 on his Dallas Cowboys to cover that 3.5 point spread, while I'm putting 50 on the Eagles to keep within striking distance, or keep within 3, or just outright win. So we'll see who wins that pivotal NFC divisional matchup between those two teams. Speaking of the Giants, let's move on over to Monday, where they are playing against my Green Bay Packers. The Packers are the favorite here, favored by 6.5 points, going to the New York Giants. Who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I'm putting 300 on the Packers. The Giants stink. I know that Tommy DeVito had like that one good game, but they're not a good football team. I don't believe in them. Green Bay is hot. I'm riding the hot hand. I'm taking the Packers easily for 300.
Yeah, it'd be very interesting to see, the whole Wink Martindale versus Matt LaFleur kind of chess match, because obviously the key for my Packers is Jordan Love takes care of the ball for the most part, and like he has in recent weeks, like the offense has moved enough, had enough explosive plays, and I will give credit to the defense. They've stepped up in certain moments and times, especially Rashawn Gary, and kind of wreaked havoc and gotten some key stops. So I'm going with the Packers also. I'm only putting 100 just because of and maybe you can blame that to the PTSD of my, just all those games against the Giants. I know we won that one wild card one, when OBJ and then went on the boat, but then we lost the next week or we didn't end up doing much after that win. And then obviously they beat us those other times with Eli Manning. So I don't know, I'm just scared of that trap. Nonetheless, I'm still putting the standard 100 on my Packers because it's Tommy DeVito, and I just don't have much faith in the Giants offense as a whole, like you alluded to. So John Moore, much more confident in my Packers to cover, as he's putting 300. That's your biggest bet of the week, ironically, on my Packers, while I'm putting only 100 on them. So we'll see if Green Bay will.
I mean, listen, you guys are on a hot streak. You beat the Chiefs. Like, it's the Giants, 6.5. They win by a touchdown.
Yeah, but it's the NFL. I'm scared. You never know.
It is the NFL.
And Christian Watson.
Anything can
I will
happen.
say Christian Watson, if he's not 100% and or doesn't play, he's also been a big reason as to, at least in my opinion, as to why the offense has gone back on track. Just having him as another dynamic weapon I think obviously Love has had a good connection with him too, just at least getting the ball on target to him. I just feel like that may be a tough loss and hamper the offense if Christian Watson is not 100%. So we'll see what happens there. But there's another Monday night game that going back to the old doubleheader that they did earlier in the season, which too much to my chagrin. But nonetheless, it's not like it's an amazing matchup, as this is the biggest spread of the week. So that tells you a lot. It is the Miami Dolphins at home, favored by 13.5 points, hosting the Tennessee Titans. Basically, we both feel that Miami will win. Question is, will they cover this spread, John?
I think they will. The Titans, I just don't think have the firepower to keep up with the Dolphins and stop the Dolphins. I don't see the secondary being able to slow down Tyreek or Jalen Waddle whatsoever. I mean, they were sellers at the deadline and got rid of Christian Byard. So it just shows you the state of that secondary, where they're getting rid of some of the best players they got. And on the other side, Tyreek is potentially going for 2,000 yards, the MVP award, all these kind of things. And can't forget, the Dolphins, despite not having beaten a team with a winning record yet, are currently, I think, in position to be the number one seed in the AFC, depending on what happens with Baltimore and Kansas City. So they're certainly going to want to continue their winning ways, because, towards the end of the season, they have a couple games that I know they play Dallas, where, things get a little tougher. So they're going to want to take the gimmies. I think they're going to do what they usually do against these kind of teams and blow them out of the water.
Yeah, so actually, I'm not sure if you kind of already said it outright, but yeah, they are actually the one seed as of right now in the AFC.
Oh, they are? Okay.
I guess
I wasn't sure if they were.
So, I guess they have Baltimore's 6-3 within the conference. You mentioned the conference stuff. I guess is one of the first tiebreakers. Well, Dolphins are only 6-2. So I guess that's the reason. So
that makes sense, because with the tiebreakers, a lot of it is like head-to-head record. They didn't play each other. Then it goes to like divisional record, but they're not in the same division. So you got to skip down to conference. Yeah.
And then I think, and even divisional, Miami 3-1, Baltimore 3-2. So that's probably there. But I'm also going with the Dolphins in regards to the actuality of this game to cover as well. I'm putting 500, so I'm betting big. And yeah, I mean, you mentioned Tennessee defense. How is that secondary going to handle all those weapons? And then I also want to throw into that quandary. Like, we've seen the Tennessee run defense. It was great, in previous seasons. This year, it's kind of, falling a little bit by the wayside. And we've seen in recent weeks, and especially when Dewan Achane is healthy, like we saw last week he was, like, this run game is so dynamic too. And then this offense just becomes way more dangerous. And then on the flip side, like on top of that, like Miami's defense, we've been saying the past 2 weeks, they've been getting better and better. Obviously it sucks they lost Jalen Phillips, but still been playing really good. And Tennessee, like who's gonna outside of DeAndre Hopkins, like we mentioned, who is going to scare you skill position wise? I don't think many people, and I think that the Dolphins will have the size and will be able to slow down the Derrick Henry run game, and it won't even matter because if they're up 14, then Tennessee's has to start throwing the ball, which is not what they want to do. So I'm betting big on the Dolphins to bring me back to positive land. John is too. John putting 200, or I'm putting 500 on the Dolphins. So there's where the rest of my money went, in case people were keeping track the entire time.
I think it'd be interesting to see how many of our bets that are like our biggest bets of the week are against certain teams or for certain teams. Because, like, for example, I took Miami for 500 last week, So I think it'd just be kind of interesting because I'd wonder how many like Miami games because they play some of these scrub teams and they just blow them out. How many Dallas games because they play some of these scrub teams and they blow them out. How many of like are these big games against Washington or New York? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like it'd just be interesting to see that.
I'll have to try to do that like once the regular season wraps up because there are some trends. Like I think it's just sometimes just like streaky too because like there's a couple weeks where Baltimore we were kind of riding Baltimore. Then there's a week that that Cleveland I think just outright won. Yeah, it's the week that they came back. It was week 10. We both were feeling Baltimore, and then we rode the Pittsburgh wave for that tiny stretch. It'll be interesting to see if and right now it seems like Miami because you mentioned last week both picked Dolphins. You bet big on them. Even the week before I put 100 on the Dolphins. I know you're iffy on that Black Friday game for them. You went to the Jets, but still, I think and then we also picked the Dolphins the week before. They did burn us against the Raiders.
Yeah, exactly. But then, like, during that stretch, there was also, like, the Cowboys where you put, like, 700 on them back-to-back weeks, right? Like, it was, like, huge bets on the Cowboys. So
I do remember. Yeah, I do remember that. That was
you put 750 on them against the Panthers.
Oh yeah,
and then the week before it was 250 against the Giants.
The Giants,
but I mean over the
big.
course of 2 weeks, pretty big.
Yeah, them in Detroit because I also for a while rode Detroit every now and then. So we'll see. Also, I think for me, just obviously this will be the last point and we'll move on. But I think also like I've been picking against the Chargers too because I remember Detroit. I sweated that Detroit LA Chargers went out and I picked against them. And obviously this week I'm picking against them. I picked against them against Baltimore too. We both did. That paid off for us. But I think this week too we're both going against them. So it's tough slant for the Chargers. But nonetheless, those are our picks and bets. Once again, air quoting around bets because we don't actually put actual money on this against the spread for week 14 of the NFL season. Obviously, 2 teams on bye, which are the Cardinals and Commanders. So kudos to those 2 teams. Shout out to our friends that are fans of those teams. Unfortunately, get one of the few positive weeks of the season. But nonetheless, like I said, that will do it for us. You can always feel free to rate, review, and comment, and we'll be back. Obviously, to share our thoughts and reactions to Week 14. A lot of disagreements. We have more disagreements than agreements. So it'll be interesting to unpack that next week. But for John and myself, that will be all. Have a nice weekend.